we got settled this morning, and to all of our viewers online. So today we have an action-packed day, and I'm so excited to introduce our first speaker. So before we begin, this is a tradition that I really love from the Plenary Foundation when we would acknowledge the ancestral holders of the land, and I think especially now that we're becoming more cognizant of the tremendous costs that we've had in terms of assuming ownership of land, I think this is a great time to start with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the indigenous peoples on whose land we stand. The Miccosukee and Seminole tribes who remain unconquered, and the Tequesta tribe, who first occupied the land that is now downtown Miami and so represent ties to both our prehistoric and historic past. We are grateful for the unique knowledge and ways of being, as well as the profound connection to our South Florida ecosystems that these indigenous tribes represent. We are committed to strengthening our relationship with the indigenous peoples of North America. Our first speaker is going to be somebody that I'm very excited to introduce to you all. I know that he's been working very hard on his remarks for this morning, so you're in for a real treat. I'm so impressed with his experience, and we were able to meet this morning, so it was truly my honor. He serves on the U.S. White House Advisory Council on Human Trafficking for President Biden, and he really focuses on a lot of advocacy for domestic trafficking of minors and the LGBTQIA communities. Personally, one of the things I like the most about your experience is that, of course, you work with Heal Trafficking and the Human Trafficking Legal Center, and I can see, of course, why Hani and Martina feel so strongly about your leadership, because you're passionate and so in tune with your lived experience and sharing that and translating that into policy. So thank you for your work on that. I also think that, again, like many of our other speakers, our keynote opening speaker has a lot of experience translating all of this policy and advocacy into legislation, and he's doing that right now in Massachusetts. So I'm not sure what we're going to hear of his varied experience here, but I do know that he has so much to offer our convening, and I'm so excited to hear your opening remarks.
Forgot there were people online, and now I'm like, I tried to say hi to as many people as possible so I felt more comfortable. But good morning, everyone. I know it's bright and early. I'm happy that we had a moment of possibly some stalling. It kind of allowed me to kind of get a little more comfortable and centered with myself. So this is my third forum with Free the Slaves. And I don't know why y'all keep inviting me and allowing me to have a microphone, but I am very, very happy to be here. I'm incredibly excited. I think that there's always so much that we have to learn and so much work that we have to do, and I know it feels never ending because, well, it is. And with that being said, typical me being pessimistic early in the morning, I thought I would share some of my own personal thoughts on this year's 2024 theme and maybe get the conversation started. So with that being said, I do have to say this. So anything that I say today are my views and my personal words. They are not part of the U.S. Advisory Council's views and words. So I remember a few years ago, we were at a forum just like this, and we were discussing trends. And in that discussion, we had some side conversations and questions around technology. And some people had some responses and thoughts and ideas, but it really wasn't the focus. And so it wasn't something that we really talked on or touched on for a very long time. And then moving forward, now we're very honed in and we are very specific about this trend, and it's the main topic of this year's forum. And this is a trend that will constantly evolve and constantly advance. And I want to share with you some of my thoughts around technology and what I feel is important to take into consideration during this forum, but especially after, when we go back to, our teams and we are discussing different issues or legislation or whatever it is. I'm hopeful that I can kind of get this conversation started, and my whole goal is to kind of open your mind and to kind of start thinking outside of the box when it comes to technology. And so I had some thoughts around that, and I wanted to share those with you. So technology has been used for decades to help people connect and to communicate. And I know y'all remember dial-up internet and the sound, and also AOL Instant Messenger. I think that was something that I fell in love with as a teenager, or even MySpace. But even then, we have to recognize that those were dangerous platforms then. It's just we didn't recognize it and we didn't realize. I remember being 13 years old and being on AOL Instant Messaging and being in a chat room that I totally did not belong in, having conversations with adults that I had never met and never would. But even then, kids were having these conversations with adults, sending photos, doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. So it's important to recognize that this isn't something that is new. I want to mention that technology is also incredibly useful. And at the end of the day, technology has been used to solve crimes. I mean, crimes that have never, ever been solved before and suddenly have been able to through communication and through getting the word out about certain situations. And now I think that there's teams and groups of people that look for these crimes that have never been solved and work together to solve it themselves. And they do it by photographs or certain people's profiles and connecting the dots. And then boom, they have the answer to crime that had never been solved before. So technology is incredibly useful. And I think that it's important to realize that it's when technology is not used correctly that it can be dangerous and it can cause harm. But Jose, that's why we need restrictions, right? I know. Yes, I agree. We definitely need restrictions when it comes to technology. But that doesn't mean that all restrictions are good restrictions. And so those were some of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention today as we're working in this forum and we're working together to recognize that not everything that seems good is good, and it could actually cause harm. For instance, there is already legislation in place that would restrict our youth from visiting certain websites on school campuses or around school campuses. And that sounds like a great idea, right? Protect our youth, protect them from the evil internet and all of these evil websites and people being able to get to them and to our children. It sounds great, but at the end of the day, what if the school is the only place where one of our youth can actually access a computer? And it's the only way that that person can get the support that they actually need. And what if that youth is trying to get to a website like maybe Planned Parenthood or maybe the Trevor Project, and they're looking for services and they're looking for support, but it's blocked on the school website? These are things that I'm constantly thinking about, because wouldn't this just create more issues and more vulnerabilities for that individual? And it also creates a barrier for them to get the support and help that they need. And so at the end of the day, it's counterproductive to the work that we're doing, right? We're putting out all of these resources, we're putting out all of the support, but at the end of the day, the people that need to access it aren't able to access what it is that they need. So I want to make sure that as we're working through this, that we are creating solutions that are productive, that are sustainable, and are actually going to help and support those individuals who really need it. Entire reason why we do what we do is to help and support, right? But people really, truly, strongly believe in this legislation around school campuses. And they're working to help remove, they claim that they're working to help remove those vulnerabilities from our youth. But I clearly just stated there's a major gap there, and it can be extremely dangerous and extremely harmful. And so what I've witnessed quite often is a lot of the work that we're doing tends to be counterproductive. And I'm seeing a ton of counterproductivity happening across the board everywhere. And we all want to end human trafficking, but only for the one specific group of people, you know, the ones that are sex trafficked, or the ones that are white, or the ones that are female. And I ask that recognize that, yes, this group of people need that support, but there are other people that also need support, and a different kind of support, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so I just want you to think about, what about the group of people or a young boy from the state of Texas who's gay, who's living in the backwoods and doesn't have the proper support? Or what about the Latina from Latin America who comes to the United States looking for work to support her family and is being labor trafficked? These same resources and this same support is not going to support those individuals. They have other issues that they're dealing with. And like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So as we work through this forum, which is why I love this forum, because we actually get to put our powerful and beautiful brains together, and we get to break all of this apart. I don't know about you, but that is exactly how my brain works. I like to break things into pieces and start from the very beginning and try to identify gaps in areas where we need to do work, and maybe we need to change whatever it is that we're saying or whatever it is that we're doing. But I ask that while we're looking for these problems and these solutions and we're working together, that you also view this from a human perspective. Remove your bias and really don't just think about your own race, your own identity, your own sexuality, your own gender, but think about solutions and support that are going to help all people across the board. And so think about it. At the end of the day, if it would put someone at greater risk, something that could seem helpful for one community could also cause harm for another. And so those are the things that I really want you to really think about, because I'm seeing it quite often. Like, we have these great ideas and we think like, oh, this is it, this is the solution. And then we turn around and we're like, holy crap, we're leaving an entire community behind and we're causing them so much harm, but we're so focused on this one solution. And it's important that we have many different perspectives at the table so that they can pinpoint and say, wait, hold on, that might work for her, but that's not gonna work for me. And I need you to hear me, and I need you to know that we have to come up with something different. And I know that's hard, right? Because we think like, oh, finally we have it. And then suddenly someone comes in and they're like, oh, that's not gonna work for you, you know? But at the end of the day, if this is something that we truly want to end and we truly wanna support, then we have to start recognizing that that does happen, and it happens all the time. So I usually leave people with a quote. And I'm not going to use the same quote that I always use. So what I did is I Googled 3 quotes yesterday. And I thought I would leave you with some quotes that talk about perspective and why perspective is important. So bear with me. The first one is, life is about perspective and how you look at something. Ultimately, you have to zoom out. Right? We have to take a step back and we have to look at the full picture And I think sometimes we get so caught up on that one thing, and we're not realizing how that's actually impacting the overall movement. The second quote that I found was, "What you see depends on not only what you look at, but also on where you look from," right? So where we come from, what we've been through, and that is all going to impact our perspectives and our opinions and what we're gonna share and not share. And yes, it's important that we hear your perspective. Yes, it's important that you take from your past. And I think that that is what is so helpful in bringing so many people together from so many different places. And last but not least, this is for my shorties in the room. Short people, we maintain a great perspective, and I'm one of the shorties, on life because we are always looking up. I just thought it was cute and funny. So just to end it, I just want to say that I'm extremely excited. I'm always excited to be working together, putting our brilliant minds together and finding solutions. I think that it's important to have fun, enjoy this time. I know it can be hard. Have fun, really think deep, think outside of the box. And we have so many amazing speakers here for this forum and workshops, but also we have some very, very intelligent people that are going to be involved with those workshops. And I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are and what your brilliant minds come up with. So I'm excited to get started today. Thank you so much.
And I don't know about you, but I found that very inspiring, particularly the call to action on short people. You'll notice I'm in flats today. I couldn't grace you guys with the sky-high heels of yesterday. But honestly, a lot of those remarks I think are such a good call to action for our time today, that we're really considering the unintended negative consequences of some of the policies we've implemented. And additionally, we're looking at how to have a more comprehensive solution that does have these tailored solutions for different groups. So thank you again for calling our attention to the groups that are often marginalized and for the advocacy you do. So our next speaker, our keynote speaker, is Ms. Tanya Gould, and I'm thrilled, as always. I will be excited to introduce all of our speakers, just as a preface, but I am in particularly very happy about this one. She's the Anti-Human Trafficking Director for the Attorney General of Virginia, and she served on the Governor's Commission on Human Trafficking Prevention and Survivor Support. She's done so much work to really bring awareness to this issue. She's got the lived experience, expertise that she brings to this work, and I think that that's such an excellent contribution to the leadership of this conference, where we're hearing directly from people who are telling us how to overcome this trauma and to save other people from having the same experiences. So, of the many things she's done, I also just want to call out one of the incredible contributions you've made through the crisis pregnancy centers throughout Virginia, and just to consider that there are people at all stages of crisis and trauma that, you know, so many of our survivor leaders, so many of our NGOs really support, and all of that has a huge impact on our field. So thank you so much, Tanya, and if you'd love to take the stage.
Morning. I am coming to you with about 3 hours of sleep, which you and I will both enjoy that probably. So, you know, when I finally got into my room, of course, everything is weird. I'm like, oh my God, look at all these like lights and mirrors. And it's like 3 in the morning. I lay there and I'm like, I'm sure someone's watching me. And I'm like, oh my God. So I get up, I'm like, I can't sleep. I'm gonna like go over my notes, right? Because I put the number of words I had into my disappointment. It was only 7 minutes long. In my head, it wasn't that way. I'm like, I gotta add to this, and I'm rearranging it. So, you know, this morning when I wake up, I go back and look at it and I'm like, oh my God. This is going to be interesting. So bear with me as we go through the ebb and flows of my life, some stories, some things that I'll share. You will probably think I'm insane at some points. I am, and I'm okay with that, own that, but we are getting somewhere, okay? So I feel like I need to give you that. Also, I'll be sharing like stories of myself. Also want to say, because I know sometimes, and even myself, growing up in an unhealthy Christian community for sure, but I will say that I will share just some stories that I feel like are familiar to everyone, and I'm only sharing them for that purpose because it helped me, okay? So I just want to put that out there. Okay. So I just kind of thought about, where we are and how we're talking about moving forward. And that always just kind of gives me, does anybody need any more introduction about who I am? Can we just jump right into it? We're all good. Okay. So, I was thinking about, and I often think about this as we're talking about moving into a new age, and yes, absolutely, the horrors of the internet and children's online safety, which we do often in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have these roundtables to talk about the horrors of online safety, but also how productive and helpful it is, right? And, there's the balance. But forever, as we were continuing to move into this direction, there's always this, feeling that I would have like, but we're not ready, right? So it's kind of it's scary. Right? We haven't dealt with so much, but yet we continue to move forward, right? So here we go. The buying and selling of humans has been in practice and embedded in our world long before history began taking notes. That's the truth, right? So some people will never know what it's like to suffer the way myself and my fellow survivors have suffered. To experience the very bottom of what it means to have no self-worth, no self-esteem. Like we're talking about low, but let's talk about no, right? To never look for hope because it never called out to you anymore. It was like hope seemed to think that you're no longer interested or worthy to see her glimmer. And for me, hope became dull and dim. It wasn't shiny. That kind of suffering is what I want you to understand. And how do you reach that? As allies, can you sit with me long enough to really enter, or even overstand many of my fallings and risings? Both are alike. I'm gonna tell you a really short story of a time where I was completely at my wit's end because, and some of you may have heard this as one of my favorite stories, I wanted to commit suicide in a way that my little ones would not get that story. Like I didn't want that to be their story, but yeah, I wanted to end my life. So constantly thinking of ways, what if I like crash into a tree and, do it on my way going to pick them up? And then my thought was, I probably wouldn't die because I suck at doing things, right? And then my kids would have to deal with me just being paralyzed. Like, not cool, right? So here's all these stories I would come up with. So one day, my kids were taking a nap, and I pull a chair up on top of the roof of an apartment I had. They had steps, you can kind of sit up on the roof. And I sit there and I think, okay, I'm gonna like talk to God, right? Because we're not gonna keep doing this, right? So he's gonna have to come up with a plan and we can do this together. Because people are like, don't do things alone, all this. Well, I'm gonna pray to him. Let's see how he's gonna do with this. So we're kind of having this conversation. I'm upset, angry, frustrated. And I hear my kids, kind of start moving downstairs, and again, just frustrated. God and I were just not getting anywhere. So I go get them, and a thought came to me, let me just go to the library. And library was, I worked at the library as my first job in high school, and I loved this, where I was able to escape. So we walked to the library, and I'm literally walking down this aisle in the library, and I just happened to turn my head, and when I turned my head, I see this little book, like really tiny, and it's called The Prophet, right? How many of you know The Prophet by Gillibrand? Yes. So I go, what do you have to say to me? So pull out the book, I open it up, and those of you who know the book, I open it up to the space that says, tell me about sorrow. That's where I open it up to. And I think, I can tell you about sorrow because I was just on my roof contemplating how to take my life. And as I'm reading it, it says to me, well, the same cup that was hewn or dug out for sorrow is the same cup that can be filled with joy. Interesting. Because I had a large, extra large cup of sorrow and sadness hewn out of me. Imagine that same cup that's already been dug well, filled with joy. We didn't have this word, but we had this word today. We have the word today. We had it then. It's the word bet. So inside of myself, I was like, bet. Okay, let's do this. And when, like hindsight, I realized that I started looking for hope, right? I started looking for this joy, this shininess, oh, the sky is blue, it's not black, right? Oh, the flowers, look at the many colors, listen to the birds singing in the morning, right? I started just opening up to the joys of life, my kids yelling, right? Yeah, it started to sound beautiful, like songs. I'm helping some young mothers out there. Only through an inner spiritual transformation do we gain the strength to fight vigorously the evils of the world in the humble and loving spirit. And that's by Martin Luther King. We don't heal sometimes because we bind to the wounds of ourselves to our past. And then we make our wounds our calling cards. That was for me. Frederick Douglass states, thus is slavery the enemy of both the slave and the slaveholder. My traffickers sold me, which violated my right as a human, violated my right to be free, violated my right to choose. My buyers raped me, which violated my sense of safety and caused me deep trauma that caused a lifelong commitment to continuous therapy for not just myself, but also my family. Society turned their backs on me because they saw me as a criminal. The law saw me as a problem and left me to fend for myself. This violated my right to community. My spiritual community put a gap between me and my faith, my right to be endowed by my Creator with certain unalienable rights. In slavery, how about we do it right this time? Human trafficking is violent. Broken nose, holding a knife to my head, parading me in front of hungry men. That happened. And then there's a story from the perspective of the person who experienced it. There's a story from the perspective of others who heard the story, and then opinions and thoughts are formed, then they share them. We forget that there was an original story, and we forget that we weren't there, but we carry the burden of many perspectives, fueling whether it be love or hate, versus just letting a person tell their story. Just listening. Only wait, let me see what I just said here, because I wrote this morning. Hold on for a second. Rant. Some people can only do this work when those they serve are in such a helpless and hopeless place that they will always be codependent, right? Some people, in order to make them feel good, will always need someone in a hopeless situation to make them feel important. If this resonates with you, please stop. Do not collect your 200 and go straight to counseling. Sorry. Dear trafficker, I'm thankful that you chose me, because then you choosing me, it only cost me to learn more about myself. It gave me insight on the evils in this world. Dear abusers, you too, you all taught me how to see you, or how you see yourself and others around you. Thank you for that insight. Now I get to share what you showed me in order to warn, educate, and bring awareness to the issues of child sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and every other kind of victimization call you put out around me. When you abused me, you didn't know how I would heal. You didn't know how smart I was. You didn't know I would become passionate about bringing justice to those that take advantage of vulnerable people for their own gain. You didn't think I was strong enough or brave enough to say something, but I am yelling from the rooftops about what you did to me and what you were doing to others. Sincerely, Tanya. Underestimated my ability to speak up for myself. They underestimated my power, my strength, my ability to rise. What makes me resilient? Because one day I realized that I could actually get up from a fall. And that I understood that in life, there would be more falls. And then because I learned to get up that one time, I can take what I learned from that one time and get up again. It gave me structure for every time I would fall. Now I'm going to take you through a reading that I did. I was just going through, as I often look at other pioneers and leaders. And this one is a blog journal, or a journal from Frederick Douglass. And as I talk about, I'm just kind of giving you what I thought about this as Frederick Douglass, what he observed, and how I felt as I read his readings. So as I was reading through the journals from Frederick Douglass, I couldn't help but to think about my own abuse from those that would seek to break me. One of his writings speaks of an owner beating his slave and not being moved by the cries and screams of the woman he was beating. And this brought back memories of the cries by myself and others who just wanted freedom to be. While reading his writing, I thought about the thoughts of that woman. I wondered why she was being punished. Did it have anything to do with her being told to do something and she simply had enough and refused? In doing so, I can only imagine the anger that reared up in her master's face. Perhaps the same look I saw as I wondered if death was my only escape. I had a voice and intended to use it many times, but then I would have to face the consequences of speaking up for myself or for someone else. I had to learn how to speak up in ways that seemed non-offensive, or ways that seemed as though my sole purpose was to still please my trafficker and scrape up some sense of integrity that I could conjure up at the same time. I was there because sometimes that's how we feel today, or how I feel when I'm sharing and trying to speak into this space. I wonder if the woman being beaten was just tired of the crap and her own use of manipulation to find a place of peace for herself and those she cared about. I am connected to her childlike faith and dreams of the future for some reason. I think she believed in herself in a way that would give her a sense of hope to speak up and use her voice to change something, anything. She knew very well her master's ways. She knew she was going to get a response, but maybe, just maybe this time, he would hear her cries. This in this space. Maybe he would succumb to his inner convictions, taunting him at night, and just maybe he would tire and grow weary of such practices of fear and punishment. Perhaps he would somehow connect with me and see that I am human, deserving of dignity, value, and love. Story, she says, as I sat in a chair, I tried to listen to my master and stop my head from spinning from his mighty blows. All I could do was agree with what he was telling me. I don't think he heard my cries. I don't believe he heard me at any time, at any point. Maybe during his sleep or through the voice of some other influencer in his life, I noticed how he would look at me the next day. When our eyes met, I made sure to search for an "I'm sorry" in his face, or even a "I really do love you." At times, I just met a cold, empty, and emotionless soul. And then sometimes I would find a glimpse of "I'm hurting too, you know." When I did, it gave me hope for another chance at his heart, or that he would just let me go and cut his losses. At this point, I was completely broken and was willing to take either option. Lesson learned: the world is cold and empty. That's my trafficker. Some of us are just looking for a glimmer of love or hope for our basic human essence. Broken. Relate to the horrors. Look humanity in the face and cry with me just as you would desire to dance with me. Both are alike. Go low with me, and that's the only way you'll know. But ahead, and history is written by survivors, and I am surely that. From history, if you don't believe the stories. Believe the stories of our ancestors. We struggle to believe the marks the earth has left us behind from catastrophes, all because we weren't there and we didn't experience it in firsthand. So it's no wonder we continue in cycles. So don't be afraid to learn the wisdom of the past. My entire being that life is sacred. Every life has value, and until we can agree there, then freedoms for life everywhere will be challenged. Short stories I want to share is Moses at the burning bush. Out to me is one of my low moments. I was just happened to be reading, and the story where Moses goes to this burning bush, which to me would be like, wow, right? And the bush is having a conversation, right? So the bush is talking. A bush on fire is talking, right? I mean, that's like, wow, right? And then the bush gives instructions, right? And it's like, obviously the bush knows Moses. Obviously there's like this intimate conversation happening. Like we're talking back and forth to each other. And then the bush is like, gives Moses these instructions. And so after all of this, Moses says, okay, so who do I say sent me? I'm like, Moses, really? Like of all the questions, like of all the things you're worried about, like you just talked to a burning bush, dude. Like say I was talking to a burning bush. Like who cares? Like why is that so important? So I'm having this moment, but the response is what really helped me really make some changes in my life. And the bush says, tell them that I am that I am. With me. Some intimate things in my mind and in my heart, right? That's where I'm coming from. And you're sharing that, like we're sharing this moment, and we'll continue to share. And you're going to walk away. And I don't want you to say, who was she? We spent all this time together, right? To walk away with your own thought of who I am. And I'm okay with that. With my own thought about what we share together. And I get to say that about you, right? I get to take that back home with me. So thank you. I value that. Heard that, I thought, if God can say that, then so can I. I am that I am. I just am. Well, Tanya, who are you? I am. I just am. And if you have a problem with that, I'm so sorry, Moses. Of self-value and awareness. So consider the rose. We all know a rose not just by its outside beauty, but also its smell. We see that the rose is beautiful and it automatically raises our vibration, right? It has medicinal qualities that enhances our well-being. I'm not doing a commercial, but it kind of sounds like it, right? The rose is valuable and has affected many lives, as we hear many stories about a rose, but it does nothing outside of itself. With all of its thorns, we deal with that. It's perfect in every way. I am is gracious and loving. I affect the vibration of others around me because of the vibration I bring. I am a gem to the earth, and I bring forth goodness because I am good. I am a reminder that life exists. I am a reminder of our power to create and to be inspired and rise after a fall. I am me. I am the rose. Here. Well, let me ask you, how does it feel to be a pioneer? Welcome. Mysterious, risky, chosen, empowered. One, this is a definition, one who ventures into unknown or unclaimed territory to settle. New areas of thought, research for others to experience. Sorry. Once upon a time, in a quaint village nestled deep in the mountains, there lived a young woman named Emily. Emily had always felt a yearning for adventure, a desire to explore the unknown and chart new territories. While many in her village were content with familiar comforts in their home, Emily's heart beat with the rhythm of exploration. One crisp morning, Emily made a decision that would forever change her life. She packed her belongings, bid farewell to her families and friends, set out on a journey into the uncharted wilderness beyond the mountains. With determination in her eyes and a map in her hand, Emily embarked on her quest to become a pioneer. The path ahead was rugged and challenging, filled with obstacles and uncertainties. Yet Emily pressed on, fueled by her adventurous spirit and unwavering courage. Along the way, she encountered breathtaking landscapes, encountered new cultures, and forged relationships with fellow travelers. Despite hardships she faced, Emily never lost sight of her goal. She blazed trails through dense forests, crossed rushing rivers, and scaled toward towering peaks. And with each step forward, she left behind a trail of inspiration for others to follow. How many pioneers? Do you feel that as I'm talking about that, right? In the years past, Emily's pioneering spirit continued to guide her. She built a humble cabin in the wilderness where she found solace in simple joys of nature. She planted seeds of hope and possibility wherever she went, inspiring others to embrace their own journeys of discovery. In the end, Emily's legacy stretched far beyond the boundaries of the village she once called home. She became a symbol of courage, resilience, and the endless possibilities that lie beyond the horizon. And through her adventure, had come to an end. Her pioneering spirit lived on in the hearts of all who dared to dream. We are on a new journey, one, though, that cannot be given to us by others. We don't know what it's like because the earth has not fully given up her downtrodden, broken, controlled, those who still find themselves to be bought and sold. As to what the Egyptians in the Bible felt like, who wanted freedom and often wondered why they were treated, they often wondered why they weren't treated with the same value and dignity as others. They were waiting for their Emily. Our own Emily. We are Moses, survivors of human trafficking. We have left our station where we were enslaved and charted on a new territory to use our lives to show the world that whether the rest of you believe it or not, we believe that we are human, full of value, full of worth, and we prove it by our ability to rise. Slaves can be comfortable. Booker T. Washington talks about this in his autobiography, Experience, coming right out of slavery. It's called Up from Slavery. Their masters, someone else gave them versus using their own crops or using their planting from their new territories. Know that this new territory can be scary, but what makes us different is that we are our own pioneers. Ensure that no matter what the world throws at us, to keep us oppressed, marginalized, tell us stories, we continue to rise. And I put, this is so funny, I said, I am Tanya Gould, a recovering prostitute. And I said, that's not gonna go well, right? Because that's not, you don't use that in this space. But who was looked at as a prostitute, right? And all that comes with it. Who is now director of the Attorney General's office in the Commonwealth of Virginia, right? But I'm not done. Territory, and I get to be my own pioneer. I was sitting with the CEO of a large company when I was running for Virginia House of Delegates, and my campaign manager told me before we went in to go meet with him, you know, she said, he is not going to give you a lot of money because you're just running for the Virginia House of Delegates. And he just doesn't do that. And so I'm like, okay, whatever, this is new territory, right, for me. And so I'm sitting with him, and it's a very large company, and we're just talking, and it was almost like, you know, we were best friends, and I'm like, he's fine. What are you talking about? You know, we're just having a great conversation, and he says, I'll be right back, and he slides me a $5,000 check, and she's like, oh my God, like I figured maybe 200, but what happened here? I went home and I cried. I cried because he saw, in my mind, he saw something in me that he wanted to support, right? That he wanted to give to. But I saw that he saw something valuable, right? Something that was worthy and something that could have an investment, or he can have an investment on. And that felt weird to me, right? It felt weird, but at the same time, you know, there's health in this. And at the end of my campaign, I raised over $800,000, which was amazing. I never thought that I could do anything like that. And that situation was uncharted territory for me because I needed healing. I needed to understand myself, my own self-worth and value. And so this same CEO I saw again just a couple months ago, and we ended up sitting at the same table at a very large event, a fundraising event. And we're catching up. And then, you know, he's a CEO. So it's like he has this presence about him that allows you to dream. So I started dreaming with him. And I told him some other things that I wanted to do. And he looked at me and he said, Tanya, you're pretty ambitious, like almost in a negative way. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting next to a CEO of a really large company. What are you talking about? You think you get to have all of that? This is all going in my mind. And I look at him and I say, I'm so glad that my ideas scare you. Like, that is awesome. Before, a woman of color, and who, has been trafficked, right? There's this pressure of being oppressed and marginalized, right? There are stories that they try to tell me that they want me to own, and I refuse to. Not doing it. I don't want what anyone else wants, like this feeling that, and I'm not here to, but even the fact that, me being all these things, right, that I want something that another race or color has or has the privilege of. No. What I want, because I am that I am, period.
Wow, that was such an incredible testimony. And I also want to thank you for sharing the vulnerable parts of your story and owning that story for all of us. So really, thank you. And as I was reflecting on your remarks, I was also wanting to emphasize that we are very aware of vicarious traumatization and how triggering some of this can be, and our whole organization, Free the Slaves, are very supportive of anyone needing to take space or needing any kind of support that we can offer. So please just reach out if you're feeling overwhelmed or need to take a break. On the note about breaks, we actually have some exciting things happening in our coffee room. Scarlet Hope has an exhibition that we'd encourage you to check out when you're grabbing snacks and coffee over there. And our resident author expert is going to be signing her book, which that's Megan Lundstrom. She's right here in the front. So when you stop over there, please be sure to check that out. And we segue into our next panel. So I believe that video will start now, and then after that, we'll welcome up our panel on AI. So thank you again, Tanya, and thank you all for bearing with us.
Hi there, my name is James Yao. I'm the husband of Melissa Yao, who's the Executive Director of National Trafficking Shelter Alliance. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you about empowering your nonprofit by leveraging AI. So today, I'm going to be going over what is generative AI, what are benefits of you using generative AI, examples of how to use it, and then how to get started on your AI journey. So to begin, I like to share the story with my dad and the GPS. My dad does not use the GPS. So he believes that using the GPS is cheating. If you don't know your roads, you don't know maps, you don't know exactly where you're headed to, that you are cheating your brain, right? So what does that look like typically for a journey for him to a place that he's not really familiar with? Typically, this means he gets lost a few times, has to get off on off ramps and turn around. My mom is getting out Google Maps and helping him or giving him some guidance. Now, it takes a while, but he does end up at his destination. So in the same way, you don't have to use AI, but I guarantee you, if you leverage AI, you're going to get to your destination much more quickly and much more efficiently. So what is generative AI? Generative AI is a branch of AI that involves training models to generate new content, such as text or images, based on whatever you input into it. So whatever you input into the model, it's going to come up and try to create a solution based on what you inputted. Examples of generative AI include, I'm sure many of you have heard of a language, generative language AI, ChatGPT. You might have heard of image generators such as DALL-E. So what are the benefits? Why should you use generative AI? Number one, increase productivity. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people saying they worked so long on something, and by leveraging ChatGPT, it did it for them in 10 seconds or less. Next, improved communication. We as humans, sometimes when we're creating communication, we may insert in language or insert an emotion that you really didn't mean to. So generative AI can help you improve in communication. And lastly, enhance creativity. Generative AI can do amazing in regards to brainstorming for you, in regards to generating new content for you. It can get creative for you. So let's go over a few examples of potential ways that you could use it. Program development and planning. So generative AI can help you brainstorm ideas and develop new programs. It can help generate creative solutions, refine project proposals. It can actually give you feedback if you put in your idea or proposal. It can basically, it helps you accelerate innovation. It helps you accelerate innovation. So here is an example. I'm going to be using this as a running example of I run a nationwide domestic violence shelter. So in this prompt, I said, help me create impact metrics. So in less than 10 seconds, it provides some impact metrics for me. Number of clients served, demographic data, length of stay, exit destination, and it goes on. If I could show you more. It did that with just that little detail that I provided. Next example, personalized communication. You can use generative AI to tailor your communications based on audience, such as if you want to create communication for donors or volunteers or stakeholders. Generative AI can help you craft personalized emails or messages based on individual preferences, engagement history. Here's an example. So along with our nationwide domestic violence shelter, create me a low-level donor campaign. In less than 10 seconds, it built a campaign called Safe Haven, Building Hope Together. It includes an introduction letter and campaign goals. Wow, right? Here's another example, content generation. So generative AI can help create compelling content. It can generate blog posts, social media updates, or newsletter content quickly. So in this example, I asked ChatGPT, create me 10 engaging social media posts. In less than 10 seconds, bam, it created me engaging social media posts. Your safety and well-being matter. Empowerment is key in breaking the cycle of abuse. So when using generative AI, you do need to take caution. Make sure you use it responsibly and ethically. If you're in a scenario where you need to give credit, right? Make sure you include references. You want to exercise caution to generate when generating content to ensure accuracy. Generative AI is going to try to come up with the best solution it can. It's important that you need to make sure that what it's generating is accurate. Be mindful of potential biases. So no matter what model you use, there are biases built within. So make sure whatever you generate is on brand with you and it correlates with your core values. Next, always review and edit content to ensure clarity, appropriateness, and compliance with regulations. Lastly, make it yours. You don't need to just take what it gives you, but take what it gives you as an idea starter, or take what it gives you to help you brainstorm, and then put your fingerprints all over it. That's the value that we bring as humans. Just make it yours. Take what it gives you and make it yours. So what now? How do I get started on my AI journey? First of all, download or an app or get an account for either Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, or ChatGPT. Those are kind of like the three free models out there for you to use. So pick one, pick a tool. Next, where are your pain points? Are you not a very creative individual and you'd like to see what it can do in regards to generating blog posts for you? Are your pain points being strategic? You know, leverage generative AI to create you a 5-year strategic plan. See what happens. It can do so much for you. I encourage you to just try it out. Start off with a simple task. The more you use it, the better you're going to get at writing prompts. You're going to include the audience. You're going to include the right input that you want. The more you use it, the better you're going to get at writing those prompts, and the more you are able to leverage it to do complex tasks. So in conclusion, look at that. It's a handshake with AI. Generative AI can be such a great tool for you to support you, whether it be from content generation, it can even do data analysis for you. So by leveraging the power of AI, you can enhance your productivity. I guarantee you that, and you will be able to make a greater impact. Thank you so much. I end this last slide with this image. This image was created by a Microsoft project. It represents me and my core values. How cool is that? Good luck. I hope you choose to start your AI journey. I know that you are going to benefit greatly from doing it. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you, James. And I have to say, for a presentation about leveraging AI, that was an excellent online presentation. I also have to say that my favorite part of James's bio is mentioning his wife, Melissa, who's a dear friend. Very excited that she's here as well. So now we'll be welcoming up our next panel, our first panel. And this will be moderated by Dr. Brooke Bello. So I'm going to give you my usual very... I pick out, it's the prerogative of the speaker, right? I get to pick out the things that I find are most intriguing and exciting about all of our experts. But I don't even know where to start with Dr. Bello. She's accomplished so much. She's received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Obama. She's been an actress, of course, look at her, very stylish. She's a justice advocate. She's written a book, Shame Undone, which I just bought this morning, so very excited to read that. And I'm so impressed by the breadth of her experiences in terms of getting her story out there. And she even has a PhD in clinical pastoral counseling, which sounds like it might be among the most difficult things to do. But this faith-based approach to a lot of our work is so critical, because as we heard from Tanya, and just kind of finding that grounding is so critical for so many of the organizations we have in our fields, and I really appreciate the perspective that you bring to that. Dr. Bellows also created several platforms for reaching many victims of sexual exploitation and receiving resources. I wanted to mention some of those platforms here. Their Legacy of the Father and Live Until You Die in particular, and they are incorporated in court-appointed courses in Miami-Dade, which I think is a really helpful contribution as we're looking at a holistic justice and reconciliation process that includes trying to find ways to rehabilitate all members of the trafficking networks. And I really found your remarks, Tanya, in particular about forgiving traffickers, or looking at the perspectives that they bring to this conversation. The organization that Brooke founded, More to Life, Inc., is an organization that has been around for almost 20 years, if you can believe it. And I can't even believe she's 20 years old. So that's incredible that she's been doing this for 20 years. She's spoken, of course, at the UN alongside presidents, prime ministers. Like her bio is so incredible. And I don't normally read bios because I also don't like when my bio's read, but this is just so much of a lifetime of achievement and lived experience that I think it's worth noting some of these things. Personally, one of my favorite things in her bio is that she has 2 dogs, and she's a Florida resident, so she can probably give us some input on lunch. And I'm going to conclude with this quote she included, which is, "I raise up my voice with love, not to shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard." And I think that that's something that we've heard in Tanya's remarks, Jose's remarks. I think it's something that's kind of coming up again and again, that we're in this room as a matter of privilege to be able to speak for those that aren't present and aren't going to be heard today. So very excited to welcome Dr. Bello up, and we can begin our next panel. So as Dr. Bello is coming up, I'll give you the brief introduction to some of our speakers, but I'll also welcome them to reference their own experiences as they're giving their talks. We have Ms. Rochelle Starr, and she is the president of Freedom Signal, that leverages technology in combating human trafficking and exploitation. She's also the founder of Scarlet Hope, which has the exhibit in our coffee room. We all know that I've been very excited about Brenda's contributions to the state of Florida and her prosecutorial contributions here for anti-trafficking work. We also have Rosemary, who's contributed so much on behalf of fundraising for climate change. I think the first line in her bio is one of my favorites, that she's a climate change warrior. That is an incredible way to bring this in. And I know that a lot of us working in this space have really seen the intersection of climate degradation and environmental costs to modern slavery, particularly chronic labor exploitation and a lot of the lumber and other industries. So I think this is a really important corollary as well. And we've got Robert Beiser, who is the technical advisor for the Justice Reform Initiative at Microsoft. He's worked with Polaris and Seattle Against Slavery. And we really have a breadth of experience here on AI and how this will all work. Again, speaker's prerogative. I will say that I'm so excited to hear your remarks, in particular because many of you know my background's in statistics. We use a lot of AI and computer software to do that. And one of James's comments regarding being cautious about implicit bias is so critical, because these tools are so helpful, but they are limited in terms of what we're contributing and what exists in the realm of existing data. So when I'm building statistical models, I have to be aware that even though these things may seem like a panacea at first, some of those cautions that Jose kind of had us looking at is that, you know, we are predicating this on known data, which may not necessarily reflect the reality us as experts can bring non-quantitatively to it. So with that, I am so excited to turn it over to Dr. Bello. I think you guys have microphones. You're going to stand up. Okay, perfect.
Do you want me to sit here or stand there? I can do
whatever is most comfortable to you. Yeah. Okay.
I think I'll just sit with the gang. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this place, for this forum. This is my second forum. Thank you, Bikini, Giselle, and Aline, and everyone here. I want to start by, what we're going to do is have everyone introduce themselves for a couple minutes, say who they are, what they do in a really passionate way. But I want to start off with one of my favorite quotes about technology. There's a New York Times article. There was a CEO of a large company. He stepped down so he could express how he felt. And he's talking about AI. He says, we are standing on the verge of a complete metamorphosis of anything that we have ever seen in AI and in our world since Henry Ford made the first automobile. And I want to say that if we become beholden and loyal to specific protocols and specific processes, it would be difficult to translate and to accommodate the future of growth, and not only for ourselves and the work that we do, but for those that we serve, because our world has changed. And finally, everyone on the panel received this document from a company called Celerity, and they did this incredible prospectus data aggregate during the pandemic. It came out at the end of 2020, and it stated that about 63% of for-profit companies were going to wait 5 to 10 years before they began to really move into the technologies that they thought they would need. And they were thrust into it. There was a suddenly, and everyone was scurrying to try to figure out cybersecurity, working from home. And the nonprofit sector was in last place. So a very small percentage of the nonprofit sector that was able to facilitate human services or understanding how to manage staff and everything related to the pandemic and technology. So sort of chew on that, think about that. And then we'll just start with Rosemary. Go ahead and share with us for a couple minutes just who you are, what you do, what your passions are, and everyone at the end of that, do one fun fact about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Rose Mann, and first, I am partner of Dr. Brooke Bello in VR Eval, and for me, this is uncharted territory. As Brooke mentioned, my background is really in the environment, and I am a champion for climate change. I am right now a strategic advisor for the Atlantic Council, which is an organization, a big think tank out of Washington, D.C. They look at foreign policy, but what's really interesting about them is they also have a center that really does foresight. So looking into the future and trying to figure out what challenges we are going to have to address in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And although climate change is one of the biggest challenges, so is migration. And when you have migration around the world, you also have human trafficking. And this is one thing that they really want to look at more deeply. And so being a strategic advisor and bringing in people like Brooke Bello and all of you will be extremely important as we move forward. The one thing that I do with the Atlantic Council is I created the gaming initiative for them, because I really believed that games are the most underutilized opportunity that we have. And over 3 billion people in this world play games every single day. And more people are using VR and AI out there, and this is really the time to start working on this. It's a timely thing, and we need to jump on it immediately. I'm also a strategic advisor for the Clinton Foundation, and as hopefully all of you know, human trafficking is number 8 on the US SDGs, and the Clinton Foundation focuses quite a bit on that as well. And so I am hopefully going to be able to bring new light into what the foundation is doing over the next few years. And lastly, and I know Brooke would really be upset with me if I didn't tell you, I have been a fundraiser my entire life. So mostly for the environment, but also in mental health. And I have raised a lot of money as a fundraiser, almost $500 million in my career. I also believe that nature plays an essential role in mental health, and my role at eval is not just to raise money and look at mental health, but look at how nature affects mental health and how we could tell a new story that would not only protect us as human beings, but also the environment.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rose. Wonderful. So Rochelle, she is another extraordinary woman. She has an incredible foundation and some incredible technology. Go ahead and share.
Well, I don't know how I can follow that up, but I get to be the president of Freedom Signal, which is a SaaS platform that reaches victims of human trafficking at scale. And our organization, Scarlet Hope, was able to purchase that in 2022 from wonderful people like who I'm sitting beside, and a lot of different amazing people in Seattle and Microsoft that created it. But we are in a place where we've created the 4th version. We've reached more victims than we've ever seen before in the platform utilizing this service, and we're helping people at scale like yourselves and organizations be able to do that as well. So I'm very excited to be here. I can't speak to the VR side of things, but we are beginning to look at incorporating AI into Freedom Signal to be able to reach even more victims and be able to serve them the best that we can. A fun fact about me is that I actually am from Florida, Tampa area, Clearwater area. I love it down in Florida, so when I arrive here, I feel like I'm at home. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just want to give a shout out to William Kelly, one of our victim service coordinator. Hi, William. Thanks for coming here in Miami. So Robert, amazing. It was nice to meet you on the Zoom call. Rochelle speaks highly of you too and the extraordinary work that you've done. Please share with us.
Sure. So I'm Robert Beiser. I'm the technical advisor to a project called the Justice Reform Initiative at Microsoft. And there's a workshop a little bit later where I'll get into details about that. But generally, I work on a team that helps reduce discrimination and bias in public safety, policing, and prosecution. It's an incredible opportunity to be part of that team. But interestingly, I worked at Microsoft 20 years ago. I'm more than 20 also. But I left the work genuinely because there wasn't much of an opportunity to create positive social change other than getting people to use computers and software and helping Microsoft make money 20 years ago. It's really transformed as a company, but in the intervening time, I spent almost 15 years doing anti-trafficking work. And as we'll talk about on this panel, technology came for me in the nonprofit space, where as more and more people wanted to use data, wanted to use automated processes, they looked around the nonprofit world and we had so many social workers, so many people who were researchers, and then they said, who can build software in these rooms? And the answer was usually Robert. And so I know a lot of the folks in this room from different technology projects and things that I've worked on with all of y'all, but really excited to discuss this new era, which connects to a lot of the work that we've done in the non-trafficking justice reform space, but also how those same tools and approaches can really be so supportive in keeping people safe and getting them the support that they need. And fun fact about me, I spent the weekend at a water park with my cousins because, you know, it's Florida and that's what you do when you come from Seattle where it's 32 degrees.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Robert. So I just wanted to point out, Tanya, wonderful, wonderful talk, and José, you're just wonderful. So thank you both for starting us out. I was like, yes, yes. So Brenda, we're gonna start it out with you. After you go ahead and share who you are, I'm gonna have you lead right into the question for you, which is why the legal system and what you do is not really using AI in certain technologies and why that is. So you just flow right into that.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Brenda Mezek. I am the director of the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office Human Trafficking Unit. That is the only standalone unit, the first of its kind in the state of Florida. I had the good fortune, in addition, that's under the leadership of Catherine Fernandez-Rundle, and I've been a prosecutor for 29 years, and amongst the various different subspecializations that I've had, I actually also had the privilege of being in our very first, that is in the state of Florida, state cyber unit. So I was a cyber crimes prosecutor as background before I came into human trafficking, which also very much helped in our initial breakthrough.
Yeah, awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
And I forgot to tell you last night, I led with, in the year 2011, we had only three filed cases under our 2003 human trafficking statutes. I can tell you that today we have filed over 861 human trafficking and human trafficking related cases. And we've had the privilege of working with over 1,140.
I wanted to add, if it wasn't for Brenda, our court-appointed programs in Miami-Dade over the last 4 years, in Florida for 10 years now, would not have happened, so.
Well, it would have happened, it just wouldn't have been you. So when I saw this woman, I'm like, no, there is nobody else. This is her. This is the one. So yes, and thank you for your service. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so just last week, this is breaking, this is sexy. Our Florida legislature just passed so it's not law yet. The governor hasn't signed this. It wouldn't take effect even if he does until July 1st. But we have as all states do, a child pornography statute. Now, last year, we amended it to include morphed images, right? So you probably saw last night on your feed that an app called Pirce AI had caused numerous, like about 200 ads to be posted on Facebook and Instagram of I forget her name, Jenna Ortega. She's the actress who plays Wednesday. So they had posted blurred images of her, a 16-year-old her, nude, right? And what the app does is it basically says, using this app, you can take a poster of, let's just say, Jenna Ortega, and put her in different costumes or strip her down nude. Okay, so that would have been captured by last year's statute. This year, as of last week, we have created a statute, an amendment that prohibits completely fictitious images that are completely computer generated if they reasonably appear to be under the age of 18. So that is completely fictitious, okay? And I know this is a little bit off topic, but I kind of just want to get a little bit of background on that. So there is, for those of you who are not in the world of child pornography, there is a huge debate on the issue of pornography in the sense of, if you are a pedophile, is there any correlation between those who view and possess and those who will actually act on this? So that is a huge debate because we're short on some of the actual data linking that clearly, okay? On the other flip side of this, if you have, and with AI, you would have, at this point now, an unlimited ability to have as much child pornography as you could ever dream of having if you were a pedophile, right? Does that desensitize you? Does that make it so, and to everybody else, that now they then become desensitized to the horror of it, number one, and two, looking for the next thrill, looking for the next dopamine hit if they can't get enough from what they're seeing in the images that they move to act on it. And so this is a very, very huge issue, and I don't know if this statute gets it right, but we're all sort of making this up as we go along right now, and this is at least our first attempt in trying to navigate this world criminally. Yeah.
And so you're wonderful and good. And so your reasons for not necessarily always using AI,
Well, I mean, we have clear statutes on the privacy of victims. So you can't show images, you can't likenesses, voices, all names, right? So if you are putting out as an investigator, even if you were trying to transcribe your police case notes and save yourself some time, okay? If you're using outside companies or you're using things that are uploaded to the public, and right now AI, at least these particular chat programs, that's what the concept is. They're making them free so that they can just basically have the software learn, right? But it's all becomes part of the public domain. So we can't do it because we'd be providing out there in the public domain all this information about our victims, also about our targets, our subjects.
That's a really good point that I think we're going to come back to. So the question for our incredible panel, how can AI, automation, you even say VR and XR, would improve the efficiency and the scalability of what we do in human services and the anti-trafficking movement? And are there any ways that you're utilizing it? We'll start with you, Rochelle.
Yeah, so our service goes through and scrapes ads that are illicit ads. And so we scrape the identification of the gender, the phone number, the location, and all of that. AI, we're looking into we have about 250,000 conversations that have been stored in our database, and we're looking at taking AI and training a model to analyze those conversations so that we can create better responses, we can generate better campaigns, which would enable us to actually get a higher response rate from potential victims. Right now, we send out about 250 text messages at one time, and in order to stay within the confines of the law, we have to wait till they respond to us. So we can really train an AI model to look at all those conversations, which is a lot, and remove the names and things like that, but say, what are these positive conversations that we've gotten the most response from, and then be able to train even an AI response. So like, we're completely relying upon humans to reply. And oftentimes, there's victims that are replying in the middle of the night and things like that. So we could generate responses through AI back to the victim so they're always responded to until a human can come back in.
And would you say you'd be using, just for our conference's knowledge, something public like Bard, now Gemini, or the foundation of GPT-TAT, or something that is your own?
ChatGPT. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's important because when we think about AI, we think about the data aggregate that Brenda talked about. And Jose said earlier in his talk that there is tech for good. I hashtag that all the time. The reason that's important because in the anti-trafficking movement, recently there were some problems with Gemini. There were some cultural bias differences. They got like a little, and I'm a Google fellow, so I won't say too much, but they got a little pop on the wrist. But the anti-trafficking movement can help to train public AI in a positive way so that the aggregate over time becomes better and better for the work that we do. I'll pose that same question to you, Robert.
So it's a challenging question because we work with, now it's 800 organizations doing justice reform work around the United States. And generally, the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, wrote a book a few years ago called Tools and Weapons. And it lays out a lot of anything that we're going to be talking about here, because there are incredible possibilities with the organizations that we're working with. I mean, if you can think in the criminal justice realm, that they could use AI and say, who are the folks that we should be looking into who might have a business model that would promote human trafficking? Great, it gives a list of opportunities for investigators. You can ask AI, what are some techniques that have been used in successful human trafficking cases that have connected with survivors and helped them get out of those situations? Great, you might have new ideas and new approaches to what you're gonna do. The problem is, as has been mentioned, those cases and who you're looking at, both as victims and perpetrators of trafficking, might say something like, you should look at Asian-owned businesses. And that would be the thing that you would get back. And that would be terrifying as the instructions for, let's say, a prosecutor or a law enforcement person who has never worked on trafficking before. And they're like, okay, great, I'll do that. Now, the statistics in their area might be, these are the cases that have been successfully prosecuted, and we look at all the cases, and here seems to be a factor, and now you are getting really racist instructions. But similarly, you might get instructions back that'll say something like, you should look for cases that involve minors, that are female identifying, and who are white. Because those, as was mentioned earlier, are the cases that get lots of news coverage about them. And that wouldn't be an inaccurate set of people who might need support in your community, but if those are the types of instructions that you get, you might then have a really poor tool for the type of broad work that you want to do. I think the steps that we're taking inside Microsoft for deploying this within our own work, because we have this thing we call dog fooding. It's like the worst version of all of these products that everybody gets publicly. We get the food pellet version of it where it's all broken and messed up. But the approach that we genuinely take is that we ask basic questions of these tools. For us, it's Copilot, all these different Copilots inside, of how we're going to approach the work itself. So we might actually say, if I'm going to do anti-trafficking work, what are some of the pitfalls that I might fall into that people have shared out publicly about racial bias? Who are the groups of people who are not included in a lot of the efforts around anti-trafficking work, who we know are being exploited, but you don't hear about the cases very much? And fortunately, because many of the people in this room have written books and made public statements and given interviews, these large language models that are pulling in broad sets of information can actually look at some of the hard things, some of the risks and some of the problems, as well as just providing you that data that might be biased because the practices of people in the field haven't really gotten to where we're going yet.
That's really powerful. I think that's really important, because when we think of the archetype of what's being built in a metamorphosis of a transition of our world and in human services work, we have to push forward and be a part of the language and the input processes. Thank you so much, Robert. Are you guys enjoying this so far? Let me hear some noise. It's real interactive. We're gonna have a Q&A in a little bit. And so Rosemary Mann, and we were kind of, when you mentioned Tanya Gould about the rose, I had to give a wink to Rose. So how can gaming, your work with the Atlantic Council, this sort of large gaming initiative, and its connection to mental health. In the nonprofit sector, in the anti-human trafficking movement, mental health is crucial. It is one of the key victim service components, not just for those we serve, but to all of our staff, especially in the times we're living. So how can gaming and VR technology be used to increase accessibility and outreach to persons in trauma and possibly help staff?
So, great question, Brooke. I think that just in my time at the Atlantic Council and really looking at emerging technologies and putting emerging technologies such as VR and XR in front of people, we had the opportunity to test the reactions of people, how they felt in VR, how they felt about AI and AI direction and AI instruction. And what we came to find is that once you're immersed in an environment that is safe, that is free of bias, that takes stigma away, and where you can possibly have the opportunity to be anonymous, we found so much more engagement, communication, the openness to tell stories, the openness to be vulnerable. And it was very interesting, especially with eval and what we're trying to do, those same ideas hold true, right? You put someone in an environment that feels safe, where they could be near an ocean, which is what I would love to be all the time, or in a forest, or in their home, or in front of a fireplace. And it automatically brings the stress levels down. It automatically allows for a comfort level of communication. And then if you make them an avatar where you can come in as your favorite animal, and your therapist can come in, or your mental health professional can come in as an avatar, that communication level is just expanded times 100, times 1,000. The other opportunity I think that we have here is that there are not enough mental health professionals in this world to address the millions and millions of people who need it. And VR can do that. VR can absolutely be able to be that scalable product where you can reach so many more people. And AI, just as Michelle said, AI can be used for good, right? AI can be used as that immediate self-guiding mental health specialist until a human being can become involved.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I kind of want to pose that same question to you, Brenda, but in a different way. You can talk anytime about some of the ethical considerations, but because you've been doing this work a long time with such a profound passion, and you have connected to so many direct service organizations for the support of evidentiary reasons, respond to that question, but add anything that you want around ethical considerations.
Yeah, so I can tell you that one thing that you get from these conferences is that you start to share ideas, and then it starts to kind of almost passively trigger things in you, right? So at 4 a.m. in the morning, okay, I woke up and I was like, oh my God, we can do this. So let me share, right, some of that. So right now, Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office and the Miami-Dade Public School System are working in a partnership for human trafficking training for counselors and school administrators and school police. And one of the things that I was really passionate about is that, having done this work now since 2000, the end of 2011, is that one of the things that we're still not doing very well is reintegrating our survivors into the school system. So that's our minors back into high school. I don't know if you guys are, what your experience is, but our experience is it's the age at 14. So that's going into 9th grade or at 9th grade. That seems to be the primary dropout rate, okay? Which means you get all of high school, right, that you're not getting. So when we reintegrate, they have missed months, if not years, of education, and school is one of the most triggering environments you can possibly be in after you've been recovered. So we've been failing at that, and the school systems don't have the ability to have one dedicated teacher for every student, which is really kind of what you would need. It's just impossible right now with resources. So this is it. Like, this could be the actual future of all education of survivors, is doing it this way and having your own like virtual coach. Like, this could be a breakthrough concept, right? I don't know how to do it, but Robert, can you get on that? Okay. And while you're at it, I've got some else for you. So I don't know if you guys know this, but when it comes to internet crimes against children work, which is, again, a lot of child pornography, we in law enforcement get sick. I mean, like, mystery illnesses, ER, or organs are shutting down sick, okay? These are like hidden things that people just don't know about, okay? So I can tell you my first experience with this is when I first came into the cyber unit, and they were really highly trained. I mean, investigators were thousands of dollars had been put into their training, and they were like pulling out. Why? Because they had I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, okay? So they had these medical issues. I then had an experience with a lab supervisor who just like came into my office like a bat out of hell, and he was like almost shaking, and he was like, that's it? These detectives, they need to do their own work. We're done as forensic examiners. We're done reviewing, this child pornography. And what I didn't understand at the time, but I did soon, is that they were all having these trauma experiences watching all of this child pornography, because to certify something, you have to, every prosecutor you have to look at the image, and then before you can file it, right? And of course, they preview all of this before they get to what they then give to the prosecutor. So I can tell you, it's just one quick story, I'll try to, but just show you the scope of this. We had a case, we had done a preview, meaning we had gotten information, search warrant, a lab had done a quick preview, and we filed, right? But we had to then go through his computer, and then to get the rest. What else was there? The rest that was already also there was 5,000 additional images, okay? We had a defense attorney who had retained a forensic psychologist, super nice woman, but she was a favorite of the defense bar because she philosophically didn't believe in incarceration. So I had her up to view the evidence, and then I had a judge who came to the bench, a lawyer, but came to the bench via academia. He was a law school professor, okay? And Professor Tim, you are my new best friend. Nothing but love. But sometimes in academia, okay, all right, they can be, once in a while, ever so often, they can be a little removed from real world, okay? So I'm telling the FDLE captain, right, like, threat alert, high, okay? This could be a release situation and all of that. So he goes back to the lab and he cherry picks out of those 5,000 images a sampler for the defense forensic expert. So I have to watch it as well, okay? So let me just kind of quickly oversee. You're talking about penetration of infants. You're talking about toddlers. And the one that I will drift off to sleep and just can never, ever get out of my head is the image of a young boy as he was about to be gang raped, and his eyes when he realized there was absolutely nothing he could do. And that's just one, 3 of the images I just told you, in this sampler. Needless to say, that defense expert never turned in a report, okay? But I went home for the holidays. Okay, and we have a tradition in my family where every family member gets to pick the Christmas movie that we see like the next day after the holidays. And it was my father, who's a U.S. Marine, and so he picked War Horse. Okay, because he can never get enough of like the war movies at the holidays. Because what else would you watch? And so I'm watching War Horse, and for those of you who've ever been in college and drunk to the point where your head is spinning, just began to connect that horse with these victims who couldn't help themselves. And my head began to spin. And then it kept spinning, and it kept spinning, and I couldn't make it stop. And then I got out, and I was sort of trapped because you had to walk in front of the screen at one of those theaters where you had to.
Do you think that technology plays a part in assisting?
I don't know the answer to this question because you'd have to have a closed network AI world. So I guess that's the next level, right? A closed network AI. If you could do so, I had 6 weeks later, I was out of the unit. I could not, there was a point of, I can no longer do this.
But you're also talking about a mental health crisis. So I think we have a little bit before we go to the Q&A, powerful story. Can we just we could hear Brenda just talk for an hour on all her experiences. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really, really incredible. And I didn't know that. I don't know if anyone who knew that about law enforcement, mysterious shutting down of organs and things. Okay, Victor, that's insane. Yeah. Rochelle, I want there to be this sort of practical aspect of having an organization, Scarlet Hope, having this organization that is providing services to victims and possible victims and doing prevention. And then saying, okay, we need to utilize AI. We need to utilize new technologies and innovation. Tell them a little bit about your inspiration from coming home to how much you love that, and how someone else might be able to be inspired to pivot how their organization is working.
Yeah, I think so. The pornography, the advancement in technology that we've seen since the invention of the iPhone, and the way people are being sold and trafficked and exploited online has grown exponentially. But what it has done, for 17 years, I have been serving with my team and people all over the country, actually reaching people in the adult entertainment industry face to face. So we'll go to strip clubs, we'll go to brothels, the streets, but as the online industry grew, we needed a way to also reach those people. But the thing with technology, and I guess my sort of philosophy is you can't ever remove the human element. And so our goal at Freedom Signal is to connect advocates to that individual, but then we have to care for that individual through case management by utilizing Coming Home that Dr. Bello has created, using our offices around the country have resource centers where we're actually able to meet with victims in person and offer that one-on-one care. You really confirmed something that happens as we text out and advocates text out, because they are waiting, if you can, really imagine a victim or a survivor waiting for a text from a customer or a buyer. And our text comes through that offers hope and connection. And we really see them open up. And it's very interesting. Before we bought the software, I don't know if this was a Microsoft thing or not, but it came to us this way. There was prayer listed in the outcomes that we would track. And 38% of all people in our software would ask for prayer because they were behind a screen, that they were hopeless, helpless, and they had no way to get help. And here comes this text, which is, what we do every week. We send these text messages and it offers that connection. So they open up a lot more when they feel safer to do so. But back to Coming Home, back to the things we offer, we never want technology to replace human care and connection. And so allowing a woman or a man or an individual in our platform to get directly connected to a service somewhere, wherever they are at, all over the country and Canada, is really our main goal, is that they can walk through the goals and the things that they want for their voice, their choice, and we can walk alongside them with more technology like Coming Home. We utilize that, and we utilize some other things, but really there's nothing that replaces. AI can't replace the human connection. There's nothing that will replace that.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. I'm going to ask everyone to do one final closing statement really, really quick so we can get into the Q&A. But I wanted to kind of respond to you and say that, whether it's gaming, whether it's VR, XR, AI, whether it's for victim services or whether it's for staff, it is time for us to be able to transcend and transform, because there will be other epidemics, there will be other pandemics, and there will be these times when we may not be able to reach someone. And so in that instance, technology may be the only way to reach that individual. And so maximizing to the best of our ability how we connect with someone, as Brenda was saying, through technology, so that we have this undulating scope, and also we're prepared for things that will happen. Having been just in Israel and having been at the UN and talked about what happened in Ukraine, and Rosemary and migration, there are people that can only be reached sometimes through technology. So as a community, if we can figure out how to do that within the anti-trafficking movement, for those we serve on our staff, the better off we'll be, because there'll be times when it'll be the only thing we have, even if just for a moment. And so the last sort of 30-second question before we get to the Q&A is start with Rose. Same question for everyone. What's something that is really positive about technology in the anti-trafficking movement, in your opinion, in mental health? And what is something that is negative? What is a fear and what is not a fear? You guys got that? Okay.
I'm going to start, I think, with the fear first. Technology is happening so fast, faster than we could even imagine. So those of us who know what's coming, we can better adjust ourselves to the quickness of it. But the majority of people cannot. And the majority of people are afraid of it. And so when you have fear, you don't want to institute something quickly because you don't know what could happen. And I think that in these days and times and all of the challenges that we're experiencing, if you don't take that leap, and it really is a leap of faith, if you don't take that leap, you fall behind. And you're not able to address the things that you need to address quickly. And boy, talk about whether it's human trafficking, whether it's trauma, whether it's, protection of the environment or climate change, whatever that is, We need to act. We talk about it all the time. I go and meet with people all the time, and we're in rooms like this where everyone is talking about what can we do to be better? And action is what we need to do. We need to act on it, and we need to act on it now so that we can prevent what's coming and hopefully be able to address the things that are ruining people's lives, right? Ruining the earth, ruining the planet. Human beings depend on that. And so I want to just put on my fundraising hat for just 1 minute. And I want to tell you all that I thanked God every day for ChatGPT, because proposal writing, letter writing, social media, all the things that we can use to get our messages out. And this is my good one. This is my good part. They matter. They're effective. And if you can use ChatGPT or any kind of AI resource that's out there, you're able to get your message out and scale that message to many, many more people. And you can personalize it. And I do it on a daily, I use ChatGPT on a daily basis for fundraising. And a year ago, my life was much more difficult. And today, my life is so much simpler to have that companion next to me.
Compassion fatigue for our staff. I'm going to skip over to Robert and then go back to you, Rochelle, since you spoke a minute ago. So Robert?
So that is a great ad for Microsoft, so I appreciate that because I don't have to do it. But I'll say the reality of having such a powerful tool is that traffickers are using it and they're going to use it. And for all of the folks here who are capacity constrained and don't have the time to learn new technologies, and you have the things that you think of as the core of your work, and this would be an extra thing, there are all sorts of people looking to exploit folks out there who think, oh, I would like to exploit folks faster and cheaper and more easily, try to get people into forced agricultural work, into forced restaurant work, into forced factory work, and they're using these tools. And the tools learn and they give them feedback, and folks who are doing bad things are learning how to use them well. And part of our side of the house at a company is to identify all of these people doing bad things and figure out ways to shut off those parts of the tool. But it's very nuanced, the difference between offering someone a job and exploiting someone in a labor trafficking situation. I'll say the flip side of that is, in addition to finding all of the bad things and stopping them, groups like Technology for Fundamental Rights, which is part of the group that I'm a part of, we look for every opportunity we can to empower and amplify the work of organizations like the folks who are here, giving free software, doing technical trainings, advising on particular implementations, teaching you how to have the tools teach you how to use them, which is a wild inception type of thing. But we really have seen so many of these very rapid positive outcomes. And our hope is that in the anti-trafficking space, all of the organizations here will figure out safe, ethical ways to have that as part of your workflow. And so you'll get 1,000 interns. They'll just be robots that live in your computer.
Thank you. Thank you. Brenda?
Downside, you can actually run entire operations out of the United States borders. So right now it's happening. I'm not going to give you details because it's pending investigations. The good news is that because of this kind of technology as well, we're able to track and we're able to work with, and we're working with law enforcement, and as a state prosecutor, along with Homeland Security, we're working with governments around our borders and the world in a way that I don't think we've ever done before. So you're talking about solving things now on a global level, which is, I think, fascinating. Downside, dark nets. You have child pornography and child rings that are there that we don't have access to. People don't sometimes understand that the dark web is actually like different galaxies of dark nets. Some of them you can only get into by invitation, right? And these are real hackers. These are people who really will check up on everybody kind of thing. There's no way that undercover officers can create real things that can be penetrated through. But guess what? It's potential that AI could. So that's something also I'm going to add to your to-do list, Robert.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, last but not least.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of what's already been said, but also the online illicit sex industry is growing at such a rapid pace that it's very hard to keep up with. So when we build a scraper for one of the largest websites in the world, the website changes and then we have to rebuild it. And so we're constantly having to do that. That's sort of on my fear side, is just constantly having to keep up with that. I think the coolest part, I mean, my favorite thing about this in the positive is that something like this exists. That Microsoft and the team that even created Freedom Signal thought ahead down the road to say, hey, we could reach people at scale and we could use technology for good, and it's doing that every day.
Awesome, awesome. So it's time for our Q&A. I'm going to start the Q&A with this quote. The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And that's what survivors and former victims and those we serve are pursuing to do, and what we pursue to do as we serve them. And I am a survivor. Used to hate that word, but I like to say survivor, thriver, champion. So Q&A. You have, there's a mic in the middle, Jose.
For the online people.
Can I take the mic off and we pass it? Okay. So I like to ask uncomfortable questions, but I think that in the uncomfortable is where we learn and grow. So it's not coming from a place to shame or put
Jose,
you
stand,
in a bad place.
I can't see you.
Because I'm short, thank you.
No,
I'm always looking up though. How about this? Is this better?
Okay.
Okay. So I have two questions, and I also wanted to add, I love my VR. I work out on it all the time. It has helped me on my fitness journey. It is a great tool, and it really does help survivors. Obviously, it does have a negative side. My nephew, who's 10 years old, is loving his VR set, but I hear him having conversations with people that he doesn't know, he's never met, so I think it could also be used as an easy grooming tool. But like I mentioned earlier, it's good to have restrictions, but at the same time, a lot of these resources actually really do help and are supportive for different reasons. So my first question is for Rochelle. I know that you're using AI to look through ads or potential victims, and I just wanted to know a little bit more of how this information is being used. Is it being used with law enforcement? And if so, do you feel that this can put them in a potential dangerous place? Whether it be their trafficker, who could be the person that's speaking to you, and then I don't know, something could happen. And then my next question for you is also, how are you able to differentiate between consensual sex work and those that are actually being trafficked? And while you think about that, I
Jose,
also ask.
let's just start with, let's do the first two.
One question.
Let's just do the.
Okay.
Jose, wow. Okay, first of all, let me clarify, AI is not scraping the data.
Okay.
So it's actually development, like scrapers built by our developers that are going into individual websites, collecting identification on those ads. So it is not AI, because that's an open source, right? That would be uploading it to the learning lab of the world, and we don't do that. So that's one. But when it's pulled down into our database, it is secure. It's also to, like, even our advocates and the people that use the platform, they do not see any ads or pictures, or they don't know. That's built in a separate database that communicates with Freedom Signal, and we are able to you should attend my workshop, okay? But I'm gonna explain this, but like, you can pull down criteria, and based on that criteria, it pulls the phone numbers associated with that criteria, and then we're able to text just those people. Now, second question is, we do not inherently believe that every single person that is posting a sex for sale ad is being trafficked. But we do believe that all of these individuals are in the field of exploitation. You may not agree, but in that realm, we're not directly targeting, our campaigns are not directly targeting, are you being trafficked? We don't say things like that. We offer care, connection, and resources to every individual being texted, and then through that, we learn people's stories. And that's how we're meeting trafficking victims. That's how we're meeting anybody that's in this world that needs help, so.
No, I appreciate the this is loud, the clarification, and I think you're kind of saying it's like an option.
Option.
Yeah.
Absolutely, voice and choice.
Yes.
So Jose, you had a question for someone else?
Yes, I have one more question, I'm sorry. This
Yeah,
is
just
like
one more,
what I do.
okay. Thank you.
and-
I'm trying to be a good moderator, so I love you. You're fabulous.
My last question is for you. I'm terrible with names.
Robert or Brenda?
Brenda. Brenda, you mentioned how child sexual abuse material created through AI could desensitize people, but you also mentioned that law enforcement have to review this child abuse, sexual abuse material, and how it's become traumatizing. Have you seen them become desensitized, or could this information help with the debate that is going on around AI-generated child abuse sex material?
Desensitized only in the sense that you can't do it anymore, okay? So, I mean, the thing I can give you is there are people who, for whatever reason, are created such that they have an appetite for this kind of images and this kind of sexual activity. For those of us who are not built this way, it comes in like trauma. So it's a different situation. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's going to impact people who are not built that way differently than it will if you were an actual pedophile. If that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Brenda.
I'm hopeful that Robert's going to create something that's going to be able to be so that we don't actually have to view like 4/5 of what we actually have to view.
They do exist. The tools do exist.
I think the same thing is true for survivors, even survivor mentors on our staff and clinicians have that same profound challenge. Victor, please.
Yes, so Vic Williams, I'm the founder of an organization called Quest to Freedom. And, people that work in this space always feel like we're dealing with what happens after and trying to address. I try to go to the core. And I say that human trafficking victims are created in homes all around the world. So going to your question of how VR and XR can help in the mental space, what about the cost? Who can afford these things,
So great question, Vic, and it's nice to see you, by the way. So yes, VR glasses, they're expensive, right? But like our iPhones was super expensive too, right? And every single person, I would say 99.9% of the planet has an iPhone. VR glasses are going to get less expensive and they're going to continue to come down. And right this moment, there are cardboard VR glasses. They're not as great. The images might not be clear, but they do the trick. And they cost less than $3. And so I think VR is going to become a household thing, like a television, like an iPhone. VR will be the next thing. And it will be affordable for everyone.
Absolutely, and in our company, we're actually partnering with nonprofits to facilitate grants so they can have so many headsets at each organization over time. But the cardboard ones, I've used them, they're pretty, we used to say back in the day, pretty dope. Okay. So last question.
I'd love to hear from any of you, all of you, what it looks like at each of your organizations to include survivors in the creation process of these tools, and what employment opportunities are available for those of us with lived experience that may be interested in getting into tech.
I think I can go first, and maybe one other person, just because we have to be finished at 11:05, and I don't want to be tardy. At More to Life and our new company, VR Eval, I am a survivor. And so I think the predisposition, and I think Tanya spoke to it earlier, is that sometimes when you prejudge someone, you sort of relegate them, especially women of color, in terms of their mental capacity. But because I use a lot of first principles thinking and I break everything down to build it back up, as a little girl, I really love science and I love creating. And as a Google Fellow, it opened my eyes. And so we have digital advocates that are coming, that work for us and that will work for us around the globe, that will have really great salaries, that connect individuals to technology all around the world. And so there's always a lot of opportunities in our organization. And the low cost to anti-trafficking organizations is a promise that we're always going to do and always extend that. And so it's a part of our pledge.
I think I can answer that as well. I don't know where you went. Oh, there you are. So I'm really the president of two companies. Freedom Signal was built with survivors speaking into the platform, making it better, instructing and all of that. We still do that, and we're building that to incorporate more survivors that have been actually helped by the service and making it better. How can we improve reaching victims, speaking to victims, and all of that, or any exploited individual. But at Scarlet Hope, we have had career development programs where we have actually hired individuals that have come out of that life, and now they work at Scarlet Hope, and they're mentors and job trainers and all of that kind of stuff. And that's one of our also promises, is that the women that have experienced things that I've never experienced have a much more deep passion and voice and can really speak back into other survivors, and they make a huge impact. And so we have several on our staff, and we have always, and we constantly keep positions open on our team for survivors.
Let's give a round of applause for our panel. Brian, did you want to take a photo of us?
Time of academia, I don't think I've seen such effective moderation and targeted answers, so that was great. So we're about to break for our coffee, which it sounds like I think everyone's invigorated and definitely needs. But there's a couple things. So when we were talking about the vicarious traumatization, we do have a room available, 3440. Just grab Dr. Giselle Balfour if you want someone to talk to. She's trained in social work, so she can process some of the emotions that might be coming up. And if not, you're still welcome to just use the room to kind of decompress and step away if needed. Again, that's 3440 in this building. Something that we like to do for the forums is usually a little bit of an introduction, and every time I keep hearing our panelists talk about their experiences in Florida, it makes me think that we should probably just do a little bit of an icebreaker so everyone kind of knows who else is here. We're going to have 2 hours for lunch, and we're encouraging everyone to make friends and go out and hang out with new people, so this might be a little bit of a starter. So to begin, I'd like to ask, who here is from Florida, Miami? Hey, only a couple of you. Who here is from Florida but not Miami? No, so everyone here is from Miami? Okay, that makes sense. Who here is from the South, broadly speaking? Yeah, including, we've got a little bit of a wavy hand. Where are you from? Oh, northern, I don't know if we consider ourselves the South, do we? Virginia for like 12 years. Northern Virginia does not feel like the South. Okay, South Virginia will count. We'll count Virginia. That's true. It doesn't feel that way. It's like Austin, Texas, right? What are we going to do here? Okay, so who here feels like they're from a predominantly conservative area? Politically conservative area. Okay. A predominantly politically liberal area? Here in the Northeast? Okay, so we're seeing a lot of American participants, but I know we have some Canadians in the room, so Canadians? Okay. All right, 4, 5, 6 of us. All right, us. I mean, I have family in Toronto. I'm not Canadian. I can't claim this. Sorry, but 6 of you. And is there anyone from South America? Anyone, any of the other regional forums that just joined us? Nice. Nice. Mexico, awesome. Yeah, still, yeah, North America still, so we're good. But south of the US, that's great. Okay, awesome. So it looks like we don't have a lot of local experts to tell us where to get lunch today. I see only 3 of you, and last night we just paraded around ourselves and found somewhere. So definitely hunt these guys down and ask for some advice, because we want to make sure you get the most of your lunch break. I'm coming to you. Oh, okay, Melissa's saying Julian Henry's is a food court 7 minutes away, if that sounds like a good option. That's helpful. That's actually a good solution. Okay, and now the last thing is, inspired by our panel's paparazzi moment, we're actually going to do a group photo of the whole convening before, anyone scatters for their meetings or anything else. So if you'd all like to come up to the stage, Byron will be taking the photo of us from, I guess, whatever a good vantage point will be. But everyone, that's all of us, coming up to the stage, please. Byron saying that we're going to need 2 rows of people on the stage, and then we'll spill over as needed. Oh, that must be it. And the second one led by Melissa Yao. I believe she's already in the coffee break room. So we'll let you guys get started and we'll report back here at 12:15, which I guess everyone here already knows that. So just stay where you are.
Okay, hi everyone. I think we're all set to get started. We have to kind of rush through a fair amount of content because I really want to have a good 20 minutes, hopefully half an hour to talk about the activity. All right, so today we're talking about technology and forced labor, specifically emerging threats and potential solutions. My name is Kate Price and I'm the Executive Director of ACT Alberta, which is a Canadian organization. Today's agenda, we're going to quickly cover for context who ACT Alberta is, what we do, emerging threats of forced labor, what we're seeing kind of boots on the ground in Alberta right now, some potential solutions, and then we're going to do an activity together based on those potential solutions, which I'm very excited about. All right, so this is my contact information. If anyone has questions or wants to connect after, please do. I'll put it up at the end as well. All right, so a little bit about ACT Alberta. ACT is, as I said, a Canadian organization. We operate across the province of Alberta, and we provide direct frontline supports to survivors of both forced labor and sexual exploitation. While our vision is an Alberta free of human trafficking, obviously that extends to global-wide eradication. We have 3 core pillars of service. We do response, prevention, and mobilization. So response is our community-based victim services unit, where we provide specialized case management to survivors of forced labor or sexual exploitation to help meet their immediate and long-term needs. We also have a response prevention pillar, where we focus on education, training, and outreach. And then our mobilization pillar is stuff like this: research, collaboration, looking for different ways that we can support collective action and really a community-based response to trafficking. We operate using a human rights lens, and we also use a harm reduction philosophy in our work. So in our model of work that we do, that just means that we meet clients where they are. So it's up to them if they want to exit or remain in the sex industry, report their abuser if they choose to, or remain or stay with their trafficker. Regardless, we provide the same level of services and supports to help them along their journey. Labor. I added this stat in yesterday, and it's actually closer to 70%. So ACT Alberta's stats of client supports are dramatically different than what we're seeing on the national statistics of reported cases of human trafficking. Almost 70% of our clients have experienced forced labor. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here because most of the folks in this room have an understanding of what forced labor is, but it essentially is forcing someone to work or provide services under the threat of coercion, force, violence, or manipulation. Of forced labor that can happen across any different industries. We can see it in mines, in farming, agriculture, certainly in hospitality. We're seeing a lot of that in Alberta. Home services, so nannying, cleaning, any in-home care, childcare, things like that. And while we're really seeing, forced labor can happen in any industries, but we're really seeing it concentrated in those particular areas. And of course, forced labor can happen to anyone, men, women, children, non-binary folks. For ACT Alberta, we're seeing a predominant demographic representation of racialized men ages 18 to 35. This is going to be really structured within Canada's Temporary Foreign Worker Program. This is one core example of what we're seeing with forced labor boots on the ground. And essentially, Canada's Temporary Foreign Worker Program is a fully legal process. It's a government-led initiative. Essentially, it was really developed to help Canada meet their labor shortage needs and to bring in foreign workers to help support that. The program can technically support permanent pathways to permanent residencies for some folks. That's very unlikely and unusual, but it technically is an element of it. And it's part of Canada's really broader immigration strategy. So it's run by our IRCC, which is Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or ESDC, which is Employment and Social Development Canada. Actually, before I get to the quote, I do want to share that the Temporary Foreign Worker Program isn't inherently evil. We do work with the Temporary Foreign Workers Advisory Office to provide supports to folks who have experienced forced labor through the program. However, there are many loopholes embedded in the program that have been regularly exploited for employers' benefit and obviously to cause harm and exploitation for those experiencing forced labor. So this quote is by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery. He visited Canada last year and did some stakeholder engagement across different provinces. ACT Alberta was fortunate enough to be able to join it. And this quote was from his final report. And we have found that it very much represents what we're hearing from client and survivor testimonials. Features of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program for context. The first is that it's employer-driven. That means that the onus is on the employer to prove that there is a need for foreign workers to come in and continue to work in Canada. A labor market impact assessment, or an LMIA. This is important because this LMIA really essentially assesses whether or not the employer has a strong case for hiring a temporary foreign worker. And it also must be paid for by the employer and not the employee, although we have we have many reports of clients saying that they were forced to pay enormous sums of money for the LMIA and not the employer. Receives a positive LMIA and they're granted permission to hire a temporary foreign worker in Canada. The employee can receive essentially a temporary work permit to come to Canada. Only tied to a specific employer, and this is a really key part, and that's called a closed work permit. In Canada, you can also get an open work permit, but for the sake of the context of today, we're going to focus on closed work permits because they're so heavily tied to forced labor. Can work in Canada for a specific amount of time that is outlined in their work permit, and it's usually for a fixed term. Employers are expected to comply with all the terms and conditions. They're expected to provide work that meet Canadian standards, but as we know, this is often not the case. So some of the risks of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program that we're seeing primarily because it connects the employer to the employee to the employer exclusively. So they can technically quit, but in doing so, they immediately lose their work permit and have no access to documentation or ability to stay in Canada legally. Immigration status. So if they decide to leave their employer, they then no longer have any sort of supports or protections within Canada, or very limited ones. Undocumented, they essentially face further disadvantages, many of them. But one of the interesting things is that in Canada, some of the supports and services provided are actually mandated to support specific populations, specifically refugees and those with permanent residence. So temporary foreign workers who become undocumented have very limited supports under nonprofits or government mandated services. Employer is a big one. So this may be part of a package deal where for them to actually accept the role, they need to accept housing provided by the employer, and that really provides the employer opportunity to further exploit them. So some of that is by making it easier to extract money from workers through wage garnishment or debt bondage. It can isolate them from interacting from other folks outside of work and being able to get them access to other supports and services. It's often in poor condition, overcrowded. And it may be a requirement in some cases that they absolutely cannot access other housing outside of their employer. So if they choose to quit, they then experience homelessness on top of their other legal challenges. And finally, there's language barriers. This is a huge barrier to accessing supports and services, to knowing about your legal rights, to even having an emotional support system outside your employer. It empowers the employer to provide contracts in a language that the employee may not completely understand, and also to falsify information about their rights and privileges. Is a huge part of this process. It's really a component of every stage along the forced labor and exploitation journey, including recruitment, control, and exploitation of victims. Utilize technology in a variety of ways. by hiding their identities through social media. I think this is something we're all seeing in our work across different fields. By having access to an abundant amount of personal data that we all voluntarily put online, which can help the recruiter target them in a more specific, inclusive way. Not inclusive, but more like specific to building a rapport. They can also sequence their actions. So by identifying the victim, contacting them and building a rapport, engaging them in some sort of relationship, whether it's romantic or familial or an employer relationship, and then progressing to recruitment, and then controlling the victims. So because technology can be used for GPS tracking, so let's say the employer provided the cell phone with GPS in it, they can track their movements, especially in the cases of in-home forced labor for, again, childcare or cleaning or other services in home. Often video recording is used to monitor their movements and then further control the victims. Today, this is a great graphic. I'm going to zoom in. I know it's really tiny. This is a graphic not developed by ACT Alberta, but developed by a different research company. And it essentially shows you an overview of how temporary foreign workers start from their home country and are recruited. And this is very specific to Alberta and Canada, all the way to when they have completed the temporary foreign worker program and then have to decide what to do there and what their options are. So this is where recruitment really begins. So we've seen an increase in public online offers where different employment recruiters, immigration consultants, and employers are working together to create a packaged offer. The packaged offer tends to include support with transportation to Canada, employment once they get here, access to housing, support with their permits, and essentially empowers that group of people to be the sole voice and the sole access of information for the individual being recruited. Home country, there is a pre-arrival stage. So this is when third-party recruiters in home countries or countries outside of Canada are able to complete the recruitment process without entering Canadian borders. So that also means that they're outside of Canada's jurisdiction and can't be regulated regardless of the work that's been being completed in Canada. Now arrived in Canada, where folks have been recruited to Canada to do work through the temporary foreign worker program. And when they arrive, there's a group of them through the same package deal, and there's only one job. And so one individual will get the work, even if that work continues to have exploitative factors, and the other individuals are then have no access to that employment whatsoever. They then have to decide whether or not they stay in Canada. So they may have familial or cultural stigma about returning home. They might have real or falsified debts or loans to pay back. And so their options may primarily be to go essentially underground as an undocumented worker. But as we know, working without status means higher levels of vulnerability and worker abuse. Find work when they arrive, even if it's the form of forced labor and exploitative work. Sufficient information about their rights, no more information about supports or services available. And this is really worse for people in agricultural sectors or in rural and remote locations where access to supports and services is limited to begin with, but also employment standards or laws are less likely to be enforced. This example here, as they kind of move through the map, are individuals who have now completed the temporary foreign worker program. They've timed out, even if they experienced forced labor and exploitative conditions during that time, they're now at a point where their work permit has concluded. So they have to decide if they want to apply for permanent residency, which is a long shot, if they want to try to get a new work permit, if they want to remain undocumented, or if they want to try to return home. But all of these options are very precarious at best. Few possible solutions that are based in technology Before I share those, because that's going to be really tied to the activity that we're going to work through, I wanted to see if there are any questions about what we've covered to date about any of the content on temporary foreign worker programs. Mike, if that helps. Of course. Just for anyone who's watching online, the question was about how many people are part of the temporary foreign worker program and how is it divided by gender and demographic statistics? That's a good question. I actually don't have the answer. I think I can see Carrie trying to look it up. I don't know exactly. So for us, we tend to carry an average client caseload of approximately 100 people per year. Of that is usually about 50 to 70 new clients annually. And of that, 50 to 70% are those who experience forced labor. So, and almost all of our forced labor clients are through the temporary foreign worker program on closed work permits. So that averages, what's that number? Like roughly 30 to 40 new cases of forced labor annually. Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't have the data on the full temporary foreign worker program, sorry. Question in the back?
Numbers, because I know that at the moment, oh, this one works. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just asking from those stats that you just mentioned, it sounds like we're not seeing an increase in numbers. I was wondering if you are seeing an increase because, you know, I'm aware that Canada's attracting a lot of recent migrants. And so knowing the interest out there and going to Canada, and of course the challenges of exploring safe migration routes, whether you're seeing an increase in the number of cases of exploitation. Thank you.
We definitely are, because even as we put this stat in, it was 55% of our cases were forced labor cases in 2022. And then as we were prepping for this, we realized it's closer to 70 now. So in part, that's because Alberta has very limited support services for folks who experience forced labor and a disproportionate amount of services, for better or worse, I'm not complaining, for folks who experience sexual exploitation. So we're seeing an increase, but because the data is so incredibly limited and profoundly flawed, as we all know, we don't know if that's because people are finding out about ACT Alberta and being able to access us, or if the number of cases are increasing. So it's hard to manage those two numbers. Yeah, sorry I couldn't be more specific. Yeah, okay.
So it's national, but in 2021, there's 777,000 migrants in the program.
Thank you. That's Carrie Collins. She's our manager of community engagement. She's going to come up in a sec too. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to move over to the potential solutions, and we're going to use these solutions in the activity as well. All right, so the first one is IRIS ethical recruitment. And just for context, none of these are about ACT Alberta, just so you know. They're just ones that we've researched, partnered with, or learned about that we think are really exciting. So IRIS is essentially an international cross-agency initiative where they're trying to create fair recruitment practices across borders. The pros are that it is incredibly well supported. It's supported through IOM, which is the International Organization for Migration, which is part of the United Nations system, which is wonderful. However, it's also voluntary. And so their ability to really regulate is limited, but they're trying to create a best practice around voluntary recruitment for different folks. The next up is Tech Against Trafficking. So this is a coalition of tech companies that are trying to combat human trafficking. They've mapped more than 260 technology tools that can affect, support, prevent, or respond to human trafficking in a variety of ways. It's supported by IOM and then also tech firms like Amazon, Nokia, and Salesforce. And it works with organizations deploying different approaches to human trafficking to provide access to those tools, or at least awareness of them. The next one is the Stop app. So this is, I believe, UK-based and launched in 2016. You can download it today if you'd like. It enables people anywhere in the world to report suspicious activity around human trafficking. And the info is submitted, it's then analyzed, turned into reports and analysis, and then shared with appropriate authorities, organizations, communities, and individuals. The Traffic Analysis Hub, or the TA Hub, is another option. This is one where what they're trying to do is authenticated users, so it's not accessible to everyone, but authenticated users share anonymized data, and then they combine it with open source data to create aggregate data samples, reports, and again, analysis, and then they provide that to other users. US Department of Labor. We also use this in Canada, but where you can see access to information on the supply chain for different products and services that you use. Well, they access some of their major reports through the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, ILAB. So they use their evidence-based reports, which are much more comprehensive, and then provide access to those sort of high-level bits of information through the app. It's very user-friendly. Share a Canadian option. This is an app developed for immigrants by immigrants. It provides really an array of information around access to supports and services, language training, coaching, settlement assistance, and community networking, which is, of course, very critical in the fight against labor trafficking. Okay, so those are the possible solutions we wanted to highlight today. For our activity, I'm going to bring up Carrie Collins. She is our Manager of Community Engagement at ACT Alberta, and she's going to explain the activity. Come on up.
This is going to be like a case study activity, and we're going to just get into groups of 4 so you guys can work through the different case studies that we have in the binders. And essentially, it's different organizations that may come across trafficking, and you guys will determine which apps they've used or which ones would be beneficial for them to use based on their industry or profession. So we'll do that maybe for 10 minutes in groups of 4 if you guys want to get together. And you'll each get a different case study, and then we'll debrief at the end. There's also directions up here. I'm going to hand out the things for you guys.
The case study that you had where an individual had their wages deposited into their account and then most of the wages immediately withdrawn from the same employer. And so that was the case study they worked on. And I wonder if that's something where it's such small amounts of money, like to a bank, but not a very small amount of money to an individual, whether or not that would trigger the same level of behaviors, and to what extent anti-trafficking organizations need to engage with financial institutions to try to encourage them to carve out budget to invest in identifying signals or indicators of such a small amount of money, but a large form of exploitation. Do you have any insights into that?
So there's a previous organization I worked for, Polaris, that had a financial trafficking initiative. And I would say the lead financial services organization that I knew working on this was PayPal. That PayPal was proactively analyzing PayPal and Venmo transactions to look for patterns that they thought were connected to illicit activity. It wasn't just in the anti-trafficking space. It was that they were like, we're the tool of choice for all sorts of crime. And so they were seeing that created a huge risk profile for them. And even though most people don't think of them as a bank, they think of themselves as a bank. Mm-hmm. And so all of the laws and rules around awareness of those transactions, they were required to make a suspicious activity report on. So they're probably, like built out of technology, built out of analyzing customer transactions, the organization that I saw in the lead, but they are part of a number of consortiums trying to get other financial services organizations to build that in.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing that. We only have a couple more questions, but I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to share from their case study or have any questions pertaining to forced labor in tech. And maybe Buchanan's table?
Just have a comment. Yeah, sorry, Brendan.
No, but I think that there is a space here for universities and colleges to be doing some kind of prophylactic kind of assistance there. And maybe we can, that's something kind of an outreach that I think would be really great for the predatory job postings and these predatory, abroad type things.
Absolutely. We found that international students have been targeted significantly in Alberta as well, especially if they're there as an international student obviously to study, but trying to access work or support their families back home, and how precarious that situation is. And so trying to find opportunities to do that education, we have identified language barriers as a major challenge there, even in Alberta universities, where most people attending them as an international student are pretty fluent in English. But appealing to them on their very limited schedules has been a challenge. Yeah, but I think that's a great flag. Thank you.
Sorry, if I may make a comment. I think there's a thing called Project Protect or something like that. That is Canada specific, and I think I need to look up this a little bit more. But I remember one of the unique thing about Canada is most of the banking sector is covered by basically 6 banks. So there is actually an interbank agreement there that doesn't exist in the US and other places that allow pattern identifications of human trafficking's pattern withdrawal. Mm-hmm. That is a lot more efficient than it is in the US or a lot of other countries, for example, because in a way the banking sector is concentrated. So I think that's another one that's already in place. And I did hear like a talk about how that is reporting quite a lot of, I think like 100-something incidents a year of human traffickings that tend to, much higher rate of reporting than other places.
That's great. That's called Project Protect?
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for sharing that. We'll look it up.
It's a FinTrack thing.
What's that?
It's a financial tracking thing. So it's through Government of Canada.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll add that to the list of technology solutions. Yeah, and we found that we work with Scotiabank and a few other banks who are trying to provide at least access to banking services for folks who are undocumented or at risk of trafficking and who have experienced trafficking, who won't have the same documentation needed for banking. And so I think they're already establishing some preliminary groundwork and awareness in their financial institutions. So I wonder if they're already engaged with that project. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. Well, I think we're out of time for today. So I wanted to say thank you so much for participating in the activity and showing up. Oh, do we see another question?
Yeah, did we miss something? Yeah, because I thought for our case study, the stop the traffic will be the ideal one, isn't it?
We 100% we're going to go through that, but because we got reduced, we're short on time, just because we have a few things back to back. So, but we were going to go through that case study, but I can come over after and talk about it with you. Yeah. Yeah? All right. Hey, Carrie, I'd love it if you wanted to jump in and support with this too, if you happen to remember the case study answer. It was Elizabeth? Yeah. One moment.
Or do you want us to? So she came.
Carrie, do you want to grab the mic beside you?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm scared of microphones. She came from Guatemala, right? And she wanted to work in the restaurant industry. She was looking to do some world traveling, but couldn't afford it. So she came to work in the restaurant industry, got to the origin country, discovered her job was no longer available and that she'd be cleaning instead. There was no contract offered to her, but she was told that they were working on the contract. She'd have it in a couple weeks. And so that didn't sit right with her. So the questions for her, I believe, were which one of these apps do you think she could have utilized to find some help? Is that what the questions were? Do you want to?
Yeah, so the question was, it says like, once she got at the airport and couldn't told, she didn't have the contact and anything, so she went to the bathroom and accessed the airport Wi-Fi. So the question is, what app did she access in the toilet when she was accessing the Wi-Fi to get some more information? So I think Brenda and I were like, Stop the Traffic might be quite an app that is pretty much what she accessed. Maybe we're wrong, so that's what we thought.
That's great. No, there isn't a right answer or wrong answer. I think it wasn't about sort of training you folks to look at the apps, so just considering some different app options and solutions. I think one of the things to stop the traffic is it's very much an awareness raising and reporting app function versus something like, what is the Canadian one? Upro, which is immediate access to services. So even then, if they have some language barriers, they can access improved service support through their preferred language. And Upro will also be able to connect them to support services in that specific location. Yeah, thank you for asking.
I just want to add to that, and I was thinking about this morning. The Stop the Traffic app, while it's very well intentioned, and I don't know that much about it, but you can just go on and report any incident that you see that you think is trafficking. But I think the barriers of that's based on what people are being told is trafficking. So that can definitely skew the data as well, and it's something to think about with any access to technology.
Yeah, I think that we've definitely identified it's a real challenge, we found, to support clients who don't identify as trafficked, especially with forced labor and labor trafficking. And there can be such an element also of pride around the work and sort of that stigma that goes with it that we found challenging. Okay. Any other questions or anything anyone else wanted to flag before we call it for today? Okay. Thank you so much for joining and participating. This was so fun. And I look forward to seeing, I know some of you folks are presenting this week as well, and I can't wait to sit down and listen to you talk. If you have any questions, or if you think of any other solutions, resources, anything else we could know or benefit from or provide to our clients, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, folks. I'm just trying to put in my contact info very slowly. There you go, success. Thank you.
Group will be joining us in just about a minute, and then we'll have our readouts here and then break for lunch.
Tyra, and it's very complimentary because it's all centered around victim identification and then opportunities to exit when they choose in a way that they choose. So really it's about shifting the power dynamic from advocates, law enforcement, and others that make assumptions about a survivor's experience and allowing the survivor to choose the journey themselves. And so through Freedom Signal, she has seen a 10 times more impactful success rate of outreach strategy through electronic communication, texting, and others than traditional in-person on the streets. And I just have to say, I get it, because if someone walked up to me and was like, hi, here's a bag of nail polish and a tampon, would you like to come with me? I'm gonna feel weird. I'm so sorry, I love outreach people, it's really important, but it just feels weird. But if someone sent me a text like the Freedom Signal that's like, hey, we got resources, let me know if you want it. How easy is it to respond and be like, oh, thanks, or interesting, let's chat. And they've seen a 10 times increase in response rate because of that. So super, super exciting. On top of that, the data collection that they have is going to have, I think, tremendous impact on what the domestic landscape of trafficking looks like, so we can actually do research on it. So I'm super jazzed about that. And then the app that I'm working on, it'll have real-time availability of resources in residential capacity and allow the survivors themselves to choose what type of program they want to go to, whether it's more independent housing with just wraparound case management, or it's that 24-hour holistic approach. They get to choose that journey themselves in hopes that we'll see a reduction in recidivism rate. So I think that summarizes.
Well, most of the people, I think I went back. So we were covering forced labor, emerging threats, potential solutions, obviously related to tech. So we really framed this in Canada's Temporary Foreign Worker Program, which is, it's a legal, established, government-run program to be able to help meet labor shortages in Canada. It does have an element of it which is tied to a closed work permit for temporary foreign workers. And the closed work permit is just when they're unable to work for a different employer. They must work for the employer listed on that work permit, and were they to choose to quit, they would then lose their documentation and access to the work permit. So it immediately leads to challenges, and that closed work permit is very tied to forced labor for all of the obvious reasons that I think are clear to us, but also because of access to housing. So often the employers provide access to housing in addition to other forms of control, and then were the employee to exit, they were both lose access to the work permit and their house, and so they would then be both undocumented, experiencing homelessness, and likely experiencing language barriers, and some possible shame and stigma about returning home, or even knowing how to access the money to return home. So we covered that as sort of a baseline, and then we did a quick activity looking at a few different solutions that we've identified. On the larger solution, it's sort of a more global reach, is the IRIS Ethical Recruitment Project, and that's working across borders to kind of support the creation of a culture of voluntary engagement in the project. We identified certified as an ethical recruiter. And then we talked about Upro, which is a Canadian app, which is created by immigrants for immigrants to be able to help folks access services. We talked about a few other ones. Sweat and Toil, thank you, which addresses the supply chain issues and your ability to look up products to see what the supply chain is, whether or not there's child forced labor associated with it. And then we just did a case study based on different cases that ACT Alberta has identified and experienced with clients. And one of the conversations that came up, which I thought was really worth sharing, was around the financial exploitation and how to identify patterns. So we had in the case study, there was an individual who was working out of a small town bank and in the agricultural area of Alberta, which is most of Alberta, in sort of rural, remote areas. And the people who are experiencing forced labor, their traffickers bring them to the small town bank so that they could deposit their checks and the trafficker could take 95% of it. And it was happening almost in front of the employees. And so the employee at the small town bank was identifying the patterns, and that's how we were able to essentially identify the clients down the road. But one of the questions that came up was on a larger scale, there's this incredible system where banks can have systems in place to identify, money laundering and large scale exploitation. But what do we do when it's such a small amount, where it's a tiny amount of money for a bank? It's so immaterial, but for the individual, it's all of their money. So if it's less than $100, will a bank even care when that could be the defining factor for someone experiencing forced labor? So yeah, lots of interesting points brought up. And I wanted to flag the Polaris report you shared. What was the name? Well, that was great. They were just referencing a Polaris project report addressing financial exploitation, and I thought that was so interesting. I don't know anything about it, but you flagged it, and I thought it sounded great. Anywho, that was everything. Thanks so much.
Great summer. All right, these were some really productive workshops, and I hope you guys have worked up an appetite because you now have a 2-hour break for lunch. We'll report back here at 2:30, so go out and enjoy. I think, Mel, you mentioned a place that was 7 minutes away, right, Melissa? 7 minutes away, you said there's like a food court situation? Smith and Walensky's on the boardwalk has the nicest sunset for dinner, so start preparing accordingly, because we'll all go take a walk with my baby at the boardwalk if you're interested after this. After the day. So now we're on to lunch. You have until 2:30. Please mix, mingle, take your table mates out, and we look forward to seeing you.